How's it going, crypto community? I'm going to do a little bit of a different video. This time, instead of covering something that's breaking news, we're going to go back and have a look at the Swiss National Bank Banking Research Conference. Brad Garlinghouse made an appearance at this conference and even sat on one of the panels where he answered a question and briefly talked about Ripple. So we're going to watch through this because I feel as though the community really missed out on just how important this meeting in particular really was. And I think we as a community really need to take into account just how big some of the concepts discussed here amongst the true financial powers of the world really are. Alright? So we're going to start. I have two small clips that we're going to watch real quick. I'll explain exactly what's said in it, but if you actually pay close attention, if you understand this ecosystem and to a base degree and understand what's going on with Ripple, you'll probably understand what's going on. And by the end of this, I hope you'll come away feeling really confident anytime you hear any mention of a fiat-pegged cryptocurrency, right? So, as many of you who are my subscribers will know, I just created a video debunking some FUD regarding a fiat-backed cryptocurrency, right? And this is exactly why I'm excited to hear about this announcement. So, as we go through this, again, we're going to listen to these individuals talk. I'm going to try and present in layman's terms what they just said, and then break down why it is relevant to this piece as a whole. And then, after we do those two sections, we're going to jump into our final section, which will be a long form. So this is going to be quite the long video. So strap in or prepare to watch this in parts, right? So I may even break it into parts. We will see just how long this ends up becoming. But the final part will be a long form where we listen through the entire Futures of Finance panel, because there is so much unimaginably big news from this, just because of the concepts they were discussing. And then, at the very end, I'm going to solidify just how powerful this meeting was and how good it was for us as XRP investors, with a special gift at the end, right? So, just in the moment, I've decided that we're going to do a three-part series, with the first two being the first two clips of this, and then part two will be the long form with the final Easter egg at the end. Alright, so without further ado, let's hop right into this video.
Perhaps most importantly, fiscal and other economic policies can attack directly the sources of slow growth and low R-star. This includes raising public and private investment in human and physical capital, in infrastructure, science and technology, and policies aimed at removing barriers to participation in the labor force and the economy more broadly. The facts have changed, and so it is time to change our minds. It's often said that change is hard, but experience teaches us it's better to prepare for the future than to wait. Ultimately, failure to prepare often means preparation for failure.
And that should ring home to every one of you, right? And look at the look on his face. It's, yup, it's just a matter of fact, right? That's exactly what that kind of a frown, a smile, I don't know. It's a frown smile, a frowny smile, a smiley frown, right? It's a smile that is out of regret to some degree that it has to be true. But he's at least proud of himself for being on the right side. That's what I see in his face. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but that's what I see in that face right there, right, as he completed that statement. So this is something that everybody in this community needs to keep in mind, right? It's hard to change, and that's why there's so few of us here still, because most people won't change until they're forced to, and that's the cold hard truth, right? Until people feel like they're missing out on the next big thing, or they're forced into it, and we're not at that next big thing yet, right? Because we're weirdos for being obsessed about these cryptocurrency things. You know, we're a rare bird still. That's a good thing though. That means you're early. That means we're early. So don't get discouraged about slow price movements, right? Understand that what this man just finished explaining and what you're seeing on that chart is him explaining how the real growth in the economy has fallen flat since the 2008 financial crisis, right? Even though the markets have all recovered, our recovery is fake. It's not really there. That's what he's saying there, right? And this whole meeting is essentially, I don't understand everything being displayed, but at least what's relevant to us, I've paid close attention to. But a lot of it was very upsetting because of the severity that their tones and positions carried in regards to the current health of the global economy, right? It's very apparent that these people are, in many degrees, deeply concerned, right? But it also seems like the majority of them on these panels, like I haven't seen an example of one that's not, and in fact the majority of people in all these rooms seem to be pro crypto digital assets, right, in one degree or another. And so this is it's a moment of remorse essentially for the system that they had all worked on for so long, but now the future's here, and so they have to move on. And if they don't move on, if they don't prepare for the future, as he says, they're going to prepare for failure. It's a pretty stone cold statement, right? I think that last part, that just rings true to all of us. So let's jump on to part 2. And of course, because it's a Jade Martian video, you're of course getting Brave Browser popping up, putting a ba-da-ba-boom. Well, I'm sure that most of you who listen to me at this point fully expect that to happen. So let's get back into our next second piece here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. So I would note for our discussion.
Okay.
Slide.
So this is a representative, I think the head. Well, he's one of the representatives from the Bank of Israel, and this is his take on going forward, right?
Is which I think is what Jordan was talking about. Will the exchange rate regime, and in particular the anchor currencies, be affected by these technological advancements in the financial sector? I think the spread of e-commerce and generally the digital economy is a big open question. And here, the issue of invoicing and having even big companies being able to do local and global invoicing in a very efficient and fast way may change the way we think about these things. And I look forward to other comments in this regard. Thank you.
So you heard it there. He feels that this new digital economy, though still largely in the developmental phases, is a beacon of hope essentially for the future of our global financial stability, right? And again, that's going to so the digital economy is these cryptocurrencies, right? That's e-commerce digital economy, and they're I forget what the SOE was, but ultimately, I also want to cover, the next panel over here. This next gentleman too. His statement was just really awesome closing statement.
Thank you, Amir.
This is one I wanted to hear too, also.
More than 30 years ago, Robert Solow made that famous quip, we see the computer everywhere but in the productivity statistics. So I think a one-sentence summary of this panel would be...
Before he gives his one-sentence summary of this panel, that quip that he just fed you is not only applicable to why we see so much stuff around us, yet it feels like we're all so broke despite our increased productivity as individuals, both in the workplace and in our home lives, right? So not only is that applicable to the economy as a whole, but also now to the financial institutions because of this blockchain revolution, this computer coming into the financial institution. So pay attention to his statement here.
We see reserve diversification everywhere but in the COFR statistics.
He feels very proud of that statement, right? So anybody who is familiar with the kosher statistics, please inform me, because I can't find it. I don't know exactly how to spell it, because I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right, how I said it. Haven't gotten a chance to look into that yet, though we'll look into it. But if I'm not mistaken, just because of the coffers, speaking of coffers, it's a reference to the fact that banks lend more. There's a common practice for banks to lend at in extent on top of what they actually possess, right? It's their line of credit, essentially. A bank's line of credit is their ability to lend usually 10 times as much as they have. And what they have is your money, right? And so that's how they create this extra layer of liquidity in the global economy for them to play with and culminate all the money up in the one spot, basically, because, that's how a human-made centralized structure always ends up. It always ends up with everything at one spot, and that's why there's always, social chaos ultimately at some point due to the degree of inequality becoming so extreme that, society begins to decay. And the beauty of what's going on now is it seems as though this blockchain revolution is actually a blessing in disguise, because it's coming at a point when without it we would have almost certainly divulged into World War III with China at some point in the future, because trade wars never end well. But this blockchain technology presents the potential to create a truly decentralized and even playing field in the global economy for us and China to dissect this tensions that we have with each other by instead initiating transactions via the blockchain, and therefore essentially eliminating the more global in nature implications that these trades between U.S. and China, right, that these trades actually have on the currency's value in comparison not only to each other, but in comparison to those of other nations, right? But yeah, so that's, hopefully that was understandable. It was kind of hard to put into even that simple of terms. So anyways, the idea ultimately is that the traditional centralized system is bloated, and there's not as much money as many would like everybody to believe, but here's a clever way to disguise that kind of a statement without outwardly saying it and then, causing the masses to panic.
Another summary of this panel, I suppose, would be a dominant trend of the last 75 years of international monetary history would be rising international capital mobility, from which has followed a more flexible exchange rate, from which has not followed the decline in the demand for international reserves that was
International
anticipated.
reserves. What is an international reserve? Gold, silver, precious metals in general, right? And now, this crazy thing called cryptocurrency. Have you heard of it? Yeah, there's a bunch of nerds and geeks and drug dealers that play around with this stuff, and apparently some people got really rich off of it a few years ago, but I think it's dead now. Now, this will be streamed online, to those viewers who are still in this system. Now, when next to nobody is paying attention. Not right now as I'm posting this video to you, a little bit into the hype storm, no. Now being before the hype storm began, right? So, this is, to me, indicative of a rapid change. And this is also the panel that convinced me that Ripple's rollout plan for 2019 is a lot bigger than anybody really thinks. It's bigger than I think, and I think it's pretty big already. So I'm really curious to see what happens by the end of this year. But we still have a few more little nuggets from this gentleman before we move on, right? And there is somebody who identified each of the individuals on these panels, and they're all really big players. So I will try and find the identities and pin them in the comment section below, but I just can't remember any of them off the top of my head right now. There's too many of them on these panels, and I am really, really bad with names. So, anyways, let's listen to this last little part here, and then I will begin working on part 2 so that we can get all these out, and they'll be in hopefully bite-sized chunks for you guys to consume as you find time to, right?
By people writing at the time of this shift. So again, Jacob Frenkel is here, and he did some of the pioneering work documenting, anticipating that reserve demand would go up with the shift to greater flexibility rather than going down. So the question, another set of questions for discussion would be, will these trends continue? Are these trends in the direction of greater exchange rate flexibility and more demand for international reserves sustainable or not? So with that, I will throw the floor open for questions.
There you go. The premise now to the individuals in this room is, so that's the takeaway from this coming panel. Is this trend going to continue? Is this digital assets revolution going to go unhindered in its Adam versus Goliath takedown of the traditional system, rising to become the king above all other financial institutions, right? Is this that moment in time? Are we witnessing that? Are we pioneers, angel investors in the most promising technology in this space, based upon hardcore research, in-depth investigative journalism of live press conferences such as this, involving some of the most powerful people in the world, in the financial world at least, right? Which is really the top of the game, it's the top of the food chain, because at the end of the day, we all know the saying, follow the money. And where does all the money come from? The people in this room, right? What they decided here, that's what decided where we're going next. And wherever they go next, we will be. But first, I'm going to end this part 1 of the SNB in-depth breakdown series. I hope to see you in part 2. This has been Jade Martian. This is the XRP Martian Report. And I hope to see you, all of you my XRP Martians, next time on Mars. Of course!